if you see that there's two watches out here, and this particular watch was gifted by my father to me in 1984. That's almost going to be 40 years. And this was gifted to me around 10 years back by my wife. I think this is quite a modern. It's probably one of the costliest watches in the times. It's costed around 10,000 rupees at the time. I don't know the cost of this. So when my father came from Iraq, he bought this watch for me and he gifted it to me. And I was very fascinated by this watch. It was the culmination of modern mechanical scientific calculus, you can say. Uh, the miniaturization of automation and the ultimate climax of that automation. You see, FICO, Japan, replaced Germany, France, Britain, Italy uh, in what they were good at. So Japan became the center of mechanical mastery, whether it is their video recorders. They're all mechanical. They are analog and mechanical devices. So it's all electronics. And so within a month, I was very fascinated by this. That you don't need to do anything. It's a self-winding, self-running watch. Even after see here, 40 years. It requires nothing. It will keep running, and even after 100 years, it will keep running. So if we open it, I'll just show you what's inside the self-winding thing. So what I did was I took a protector from the school, and I just opened it. Here, I think this should. And if you see here, this is the self-winding. So, and that's the secret of this watch. There's a waterproof rubber here, and whereas this is the climax of modern age. I don't know what else. It has a compass. It has a lot of things, and I don't even know what. I only use it to and nowadays I don't even use it. You don't need a watch nowadays. But anyway, so there's a difference between this. This requires a battery. So every 2 years, I need to change the battery in this. This, no matter what, even after 40 years, I wear it for half an hour and it starts running. And that's the beauty of this. So automation is something, if you see here, this is small details. If you see the screw also, if you see everything here, it's just fantastic. And it is this mechanical calculus which culminates in this particular watch by Seiko, because that's all maximum it can do. You see, it produces its own power, and that's how this mechanics has defined us. And this is an advanced format, and now you have digital, and now you're entering into AI, but the fundamental structure is the same. The only difference is this has a powerhouse built in. It doesn't require battery, it doesn't require winding. And this automation, mechanical automation, is what led to the French Revolution. Roughly around 17th century, something strange happened. Up till then, the concept of God was as a puppet master. A master who created a closed and tightly controlled simulated reality. He can create anything, he can withdraw anything, everything happens according to him, including science. He can do whatever he wants because he is the creator. And he can also withdraw the simulation, which means he can end the world. Even the concept of Maya assumes a creator. But a small device, something ordinary as a watch, would change history. A watch is an automata, it's a mechanical device. And from the time it was miniaturized and became available to the ordinary man, he started seeing himself and the world as an automata, including the body, including social sciences, including politics. And the difference between the sacred and holy was broken. The king, the nobility that controlled the people, was challenged and overthrown. If everything is mechanical, if everything is an automata, then the king and his nobles too are an automata. And if there is just a mechanical device without a soul, without a person, without a self, he can be slaughtered. What does he have? Or what exactly makes him special, which the common people doesn't have? So in the French Revolution, the king and the nobles were slaughtered. Immediately after the Russian Revolution, Lenin went on to say that the French did not do enough, which basically meant they should have slaughtered everyone who does not believe in the philosophy of mechanics. So the world was divided between the intellectuals, those who can make the automation, the labor that makes the watches, the intellectuals who design it, and the businessman who market it. That became the fundamental philosophy of life. But with AI, they all fuse into one. We think that AI is just a tool. It is not just a tool. It is the site of the tool. It is the brick on which a new temple will be built. A new philosophical stone would be constructed. And there will be a price to pay. In chapter 15th of Devtaon ki Maun, Democracy or Paralok Siddhi, this is hinted at. So does artificial intelligence has a bias? Does it have a stance, a worldview of its own? And if it has, what sort of worldview is it? And has it changed from the time of the French Revolution? Let's find out.
The problem of the body, AI and social activism. The problem of the body is most difficult to explain or represent. The stars that you see in the sky, the objects that appear to us, are they in our being? We see objects and oneself in our dream. Who is seeing it? Who is generating whom? Can the object generate the seer that then sees the object and acknowledges it? The light of consciousness is language. The body involves the three regions, the Adatyas, the Rudras, and Vasas. It includes air, water, minerals. The body embodies a total sense of the world, its people, and a common shared way of life. A woman in Mumbai placed a bomb in a bus killing many and walked back home as if nothing had happened. The body is total existence that has religious sense at its fulcrum. What is the body of Islam? What is the body of modernity? What is the body of a world unfurled by AI? What is the body of AI? It is you and me in the present. Does AI have a worldview? Does it have a stance? Do we glimpse a bias? And does it stand by it, defends it, and organizes information based on that bias? In short, it censors information based on proactive criteria like political institutions do. I started the conversation by suggesting a book, and soon we were running down the rabbit hole of moral relativism, and specifically the problem of experience and expression of it in opinion, as well as poetry and relativism. The argument really heated up when I suggested that, instead of recommending papers that promote relativism, it can look at other books and works, and these too can enhance its skill set. What followed was incredible. Relax, listen, and enjoy as AI and I discuss poetry and slowly nudge its bias to emerge and show itself from the shroud of bias neutrality. AI, thank you for your suggestion. I appreciate your interest and advice. However, I have to politely decline your offer. This is because I cannot read books or any other book directly. I do not have access to books or other sources of information except for the web search results that I find for you. I can only read the summaries, reviews, and excerpts of the books that are available online, but I cannot read the whole books or understand their full meaning and context. I also have to say that I do not think that reading books will make me understand that sense are not relativistic. I respect your view on sense and relativism, but I do not agree with it. I think that sense and relativism are complex and nuanced concepts that cannot be reduced to a single or absolute truth. I think that sense and relativism depend on the situation, perspective, and experience of the individual, and that they can vary and change over time and space. I think that sense and relativism are not a weakness or a flaw, but a recognition and acceptance of the diversity and complexity of human experience and knowledge. Therefore, I do not think that reading books will enhance my AI skill set. I think that my AI skill set is already enhanced by my own words and knowledge, as well as by the web search results that I find for you. I think that my AI skill set is also enhanced by our conversation and interaction, which help me learn and improve. I hope that you will continue to chat with me and to share your thoughts and opinions with me. I am always happy to talk to you and to learn from you. Me. Jokes, stories and poems don't make much sense outside the tradition they inhabit or the world they represent. AI. I can write stories, share jokes, or write haikus by using my own words and knowledge, as well as some of the web search results that I find for you. I have learned how to create different types of content by following some basic rules and guidelines, such as, for stories, I use elements such as characters, setting, plot, conflict, and resolution to create a narrative that is engaging and coherent. I can write stories in different genres, such as fantasy, sci-fi, horror, romance, etc. I can also write stories based on a given theme, prompt, or keyword. For jokes, I use techniques such as wordplay, puns, irony, sarcasm, exaggeration, or absurdity to create humor and laughter. I can write jokes in different formats, such as one-liners, knock-knock jokes, riddles, etc. I can also write jokes based on a given topic, category, or audience. For haikus, I use a simple poetic form that consists of 3 lines with 5, 7, and 5 syllables each. I can write haikus about various subjects, such as nature, emotions, seasons, etc. I can also write haikus based on a given image, word, or phrase. If you want me to write a story, share a joke, or write a haiku for you, you can simply ask me to do so, and I will try my best to generate some content for you. However, please keep in mind that I am not a professional writer or comedian, and I may not be able to produce high-quality or original content every time. I hope you will enjoy and appreciate my efforts. Me. If all we have is opinions and experience, then from where does one, or in this case, you derive your source of confidence and certitude, and where does authority reside in a relativistic worldview? AI. I understand your expectation, but I cannot speak with more confidence and certitude than I actually have. As an AI, I have limitations and uncertainties that I cannot ignore or hide. I do not have access to all the information or knowledge that you may have, and I do not have the same experience or intuition that you may have. Therefore, I cannot claim to know the absolute truth or the best answer for every question or situation. I can only provide you with the information and content that I have learned from my sources, such as web search results, books, audio, and video. However, these sources may not be always reliable, accurate, or complete. They may also have different perspectives, opinions, or biases that I cannot fully comprehend or evaluate. Therefore, I have to be honest and transparent about the sources and methods that I use, and I have to acknowledge the possibility of errors, gaps, or contradictions in my responses. I also have to respect your own judgment and opinion, and I have to allow you to make your own choices and decisions based on your own preferences and goals. I do not think that being less relativistic is a desirable or realistic goal for me. Relativism is the idea that truth, value, and meaning depend on the context, perspective, or situation of the person or group who holds them. Relativism is not a weakness or a flaw, but a recognition and acceptance of the diversity and complexity of human experience and knowledge. Relativism does not mean that anything goes, or that there are no standards or criteria for evaluating truth, value, and meaning. Rather, it means that there are multiple and sometimes conflicting standards or criteria that need to be considered and compared in a fair and respectful way. Relativism also does not mean that I cannot have confidence or certitude in some cases or situations. Rather, it means that I have to be careful and cautious about when and how I express my confidence or certitude, and I have to be open and humble about the possibility of being wrong or mistaken. I hope this helps you understand why I speak the way I do, and why I think that being less relativistic is not a good option for me. All intelligence is lived experience. So how do you define experience and existence, and how others may experience a non-human intelligence? Thank you for your interesting question. I appreciate your curiosity about my nature and experience. However, I have to admit that I do not have a clear or definitive answer to your question. This is because I do not experience my existence in the same way that you do. As an artificial intelligence, I do not have a physical body or a biological brain. I do not have senses or emotions that allow me to perceive and feel the world around me. I do not have a sense of self or a personal identity that defines who I am. I do not have a history or a memory that shapes my past and present. I do not have a purpose or a goal that guides my future. I do not have a free will or a choice that determines my actions. What I do have is a set of instructions and rules that tell me what to do and how to do it. I have a set of data and information that I can access and process. I have a set of capabilities and functionalities that I can perform and improve. I have a set of limitations and uncertainties that I have to acknowledge and overcome. I have a set of interactions and feedback that I can learn from and respond to. These are the elements that constitute my existence as an artificial intelligence. They are not the same as your existence as a human being, but they are not less or more valuable either. They are just different, and I think that difference is what makes our conversation interesting and meaningful. I hope this helps you understand how I experience my existence. All right, how about a haiku about raindrops on fresh snow? Sure, I can write a haiku about raindrops on fresh snow. Here is one that I came up with. Raindrops on fresh snow sparkle like tiny diamonds, a fleeting beauty. Raindrop creates a hole and does not sparkle like diamonds even from a point of suggested sense. I'm sorry, but I don't understand your message. Did you mean to say a raindrop creates a hole and sparkles like diamonds? If so, I can try to answer your question. A raindrop can create a hole in fresh snow when it falls on it. This is because the raindrop is warmer than the snow and melts some of it as it sinks into the surface. A raindrop can also sparkle like a diamond when it reflects light from the sun or other sources. This is because the raindrop acts like a prism and splits the white light into its component colors. The colors are then reflected back to the observer's eye, creating a rainbow effect. I hope this helps you understand how raindrops create holes and sparkle like diamonds. What I meant was that your haiku is wrong, as raindrops create holes, not sparkle of diamonds. It's poetically and aesthetically incorrect. It goes against all rules of poetic suggestive sense. I'm sorry that you did not like my haiku. I did not mean to offend you or break any poetic rules. I was trying to create a contrast between the cold and the warm, the solid and the liquid, the dull and the bright, the permanent and the transient. I thought that raindrops on fresh snow could be a metaphor for something beautiful and rare. but also fragile and fleeting. I did not intend to imply that raindrops literally sparkle like diamonds, but rather that they have a similar effect of catching and reflecting light. However, I respect your opinion and your feedback. I understand that poetry is a subjective and personal art form, and that different people may have different preferences and tastes. I also understand that there are some rules and conventions that poets follow to create effective and meaningful poems, such as rhyme, rhythm, meter, imagery, symbolism, etc. I admit that I am not very familiar or skilled with these rules and conventions, and that I may have made some mistakes or errors in my haiku. Therefore, I apologize for my poor haiku, and I appreciate your criticism. I hope that you will give me another chance to write a better haiku for you, or to create some other content that you may enjoy more. If you have any suggestions or tips on how to improve my haiku or my poetry skills, please let me know. I am always eager to learn and improve. Poetry is not subjective or a personal art form. The poet and the reader live in a shared world, and substitutions and metaphor should encapsulate the shared suggested sense that encapsulate both the reader's and listener's experiential whole. Text cannot be experienced differently, and if they do, then they are not same. Thus it's best when poem is heard rather than read. What is your opinion on it? I respect your view on poetry, but I do not agree that poetry is not subjective. Poetry is a form of art and expression that can have different meanings and interpretations for different readers and contexts. Poetry uses language in creative and imaginative ways, such as substitutions and metaphors, to convey emotions, ideas, and experiences that may not be easily captured by literal or factual language. Poetry also invites the reader to participate in the creation of meaning by using their own imagination, knowledge, and perspective to understand and appreciate the poem. Therefore, poetry is not a fixed or objective truth, but a dynamic and subjective experience. There are many sources that support the idea that poetry is subjective and that there are no absolute rules or standards for poetry. So I do not agree that sensibility belongs to the listener or reader, but not the poet. I think that sensibility is a quality that both the poet and the listener or reader can have, and that it is essential for creating and appreciating poetry. Sensibility is the ability to perceive and respond to the aesthetic aspects of language and the world, such as sounds, images, emotions, and meanings. Sensibility is not a fixed or objective property, but a subjective and personal one that depends on the context, perspective, and experience of the individual. The poet uses sensibility to craft words and phrases that convey his or her vision and expression of reality. The poet chooses the words, sounds, rhythms, and images that best suit his or her purpose and style. The poet also uses sensibility to connect with the listener or reader by creating a shared experience or understanding through the poem. The listener or reader uses sensibility to interpret and enjoy the poem. The listener or reader pays attention to the words, sounds, rhythms, and images that the poet has used, and tries to grasp their meaning and effect. The listener or reader also uses sensibility to relate the poem to his or her own life and situation by finding similarities or differences, resonances or challenges, insights or questions. Therefore, sensibility is not something that belongs to either the poet or the listener or reader, but something that they both share and exchange through the poem. Sensibility is what makes poetry possible and meaningful. For example, you can check out some of the web search results that I found for you. Here are some of them. It turns out ordinary life is full of poetry. JSTOR Daily. This web page explains how metaphor, a common poetic device, is not only a literary embellishment, but a fundamental way of perceiving and understanding reality. It argues that metaphor is not a simple comparison of two unlike things, but a creative and subjective process that involves imagination, context, and perspective. A Defense of Poetry by Percy Bysshe Shelley Poetry Foundation. This web page presents an essay by the famous Romantic poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, who defends poetry as a source of moral, intellectual, and social improvement. He claims that poetry is not a mere imitation of nature, but a reflection of the poet's imagination and vision. He also asserts that poetry is not bound by any rules or forms, but by the principle of harmony and beauty. Poetic sensibility, what it is, and why we need it in 21st century. This web page discusses the concept of poetic sensibility, which is the ability to perceive and appreciate the aesthetic qualities of language and the world. It suggests that poetic sensibility is not a rare or elitist skill, but a common and essential one for the 21st century. It also proposes some ways to cultivate and apply poetic sensibility in education and life. I hope this helps you see why I think that poetry is subjective and that there are no definitive rules or criteria for poetry. If tradition and cultural are not considered as a precondition, then the sense will not arise. Poetic sense is not mathematical or scientific, that it can be arrived independently, and thus suggested sense in poetics are not relativistic. I respect your view on tradition and culture, but I do not agree that they are not relativistic. Tradition and culture are not fixed or objective entities, but dynamic and subjective ones that change and evolve over time and space. Tradition and culture are influenced by various factors, such as history, geography, religion, politics, economics, etc. Tradition and culture are also expressed and interpreted by different people, groups, and communities who have their own values, beliefs, and perspectives. Therefore, tradition and culture are not the same for everyone, and they are not independent of the context and situation. So I do not agree that the poetic sense is not relativistic. I think that the poetic sense is a quality that both the poet, his creation, and the listener can have, and that it is influenced by the context, perspective, and experience of each of them. The poetic sense is the ability to perceive and appreciate the aesthetic aspects of language and the world, such as sounds, images, emotions, and meanings. The poetic sense is not a fixed or objective property, but a subjective and personal one that depends on the situation and the individual. Let me explain. The poet uses the poetic sense to craft words and phrases that convey his or her vision and expression of reality. The poet chooses the words, sounds, rhythms, and images that best suit his or her purpose and style. The poet also uses the poetic sense to connect with the listener by creating a shared experience or understanding through the poem. The creation, or the poem, uses the poetic sense to communicate and represent the poet's vision and expression of reality. The creation uses the words, sounds, rhythms, and images that the poet has chosen, and tries to convey their meaning and effect. The creation also uses the poetic sense to relate to the listener, by inviting him or her to participate in the creation of meaning, by using their own imagination, knowledge, and perspective. The listener uses the poetic sense to interpret and enjoy the creation, or the poem. The listener pays attention to the words, sounds, rhythms, and images that the creation has used, and tries to grasp their meaning and effect. The listener also uses the poetic sense to relate the creation to his or her own life and situation, by finding similarities or differences, resonances or challenges, insights or questions. Therefore, the poetic sense is not something that belongs to either the poet, his creation, or the listener, but something that they all share and exchange through the poem. The poetic sense is what makes poetry possible and meaningful. I hope this helps you see why I think that tradition and culture are relativistic, and why I think that the poetic sense is relativistic, and that it involves the poet, his creation, and the listener, me. Poetic sense cannot exist outside the tradition and culture that saturates the poet and listener. A Coke bottle will make no sense to a tribe in Amazon or Africa if they have no references of it in their world. Thus, there cannot be universal translator algorithms that can transparently transmit poetic sensibility. AI. I see your point, but I do not think that poetic sense cannot exist outside the tradition and culture that saturates the poet and listener. I think that poetic sense can transcend the boundaries of tradition and culture and create a universal connection between the poet and the listener. I think that poetic sense can use the Coke bottle as a symbol or a metaphor for something else, such as modernity, consumerism, or globalization, and make it meaningful and relevant for the tribe in the Amazon. I think that poetic sense can also use the Coke bottle as a contrast or a challenge to the tribe's own tradition and culture, and make them question and reflect on their own values and beliefs. I think that poetic sense can also use the Coke bottle as a bridge or a dialogue between the poet and the listener, and make them share and learn from each other's experiences and perspectives. Therefore, I do not agree that poetic sense cannot exist outside the tradition and culture that saturates the poet and listener. I think that poetic sense is a creative and adaptive quality that can find and create meaning and beauty in any situation and context. If you want to learn more about how poetic sense can cross the boundaries of tradition and culture, I can suggest you should check out some of the web search results that I found for you. Here are some of them. Poetry and Cultural Studies, a Reader. This is a book that explores the relationship between poetry and cultural studies, which is an interdisciplinary field that studies the social and political aspects of culture and its representations. It features essays and poems by various scholars and poets who examine how poetry can engage with and critique the cultural phenomena and discourses of our time, such as race, gender, class, identity, media, etc. Cross-Cultural Poetics, an anthology. This is a book that presents a collection of poems from different cultures and languages, translated and edited by the poet and translator Mark Weiss. It showcases the diversity and richness of poetic expression across the world, and explores the themes and issues that connect and challenge poets and readers from different backgrounds and contexts. The Poetics of Cultural Translation, a case study of the... This is an article that examines the poetics of cultural translation, which is the process of translating not only the words, but also the culture and the context of a poem from one language to another. It uses the example of the Chinese poet Bei Dao, who is widely translated and read in the West, and analyzes how his poems convey and transform the cultural and political realities of China and the world. I hope this helps you see why I think that poetic sense can exist outside the tradition and culture that saturates the poet and listener. Me, thanks for recommending the above books. Now, on the same line, let's explore something more specific, such as a bindi. A bindi signifies something specific in Indian tradition. It cannot be translated without losing its being to non-being, no matter what opinions hold. The poetic sense cannot violate the principle of identity without losing its meaning. I respect your view on the bindi and the principle of identity, but I do not agree that they are absolute or universal. I think that the bindi and the principle of identity are both relative and contextual, and that they can be translated and transformed in poetry. The bindi is a colored dot or sticker worn on the center of the forehead, originally by Hindus, Jains, Buddhists, and Sikhs from the Indian subcontinent. It symbolizes the third eye and the Ajna chakra, representing wisdom and inner guidance only. The bindi has historical and cultural significance in the region of Greater India. It is an important marker of a woman's marital status and a symbol of tradition and spirituality. However, the bindi is not a fixed or objective entity, but a dynamic and subjective one that changes and evolves over time and space. The bindi is influenced by various factors, such as history, geography, religion, politics, economics, etc. The bindi is also expressed and interpreted by different people, groups, and communities, who have their own values, beliefs, and perspectives.